I'd just come back from town feeling pretty good about the day, whistling, tapping the wheel with my fingers, thinking about taking it easy for the rest of the afternoon. My farm usually promised that peace, quiet, the kind of stillness you can only get when it's just you, open land, and the occasional distant sound of cattle. But when I turned into the driveway, all that peace got stomped into the dirt, hard. I hit the brakes, my truck skidding a little on the gravel, because what I was seeing didn't make sense. My front pasture was no longer my front pasture. It looked like someone had dragged in a slice of suburbia and set up camp. Tents, lawn chairs, tables covered in bright tablecloths, a couple of those fancy charcuterie boards, and people, dozens of them, lounging around like they were at some kind of high-end festival, sipping mimosas, laughing too loud, nibbling on cubes of cheese like they belonged there. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling my pulse jump. This was my land, private land, and it had been turned into a damn picnic ground. And then I saw her, Diane Whitmore, standing dead center like the queen of it all, waving her arms as she directed people where to set up their coolers and blankets. Like this was all part of some grand plan she'd put together, and I was just an unexpected speed bump. I slammed my truck into park so hard Duke, my dog who was riding shotgun, jumped out ahead of me, barking like he already knew things were about to go sideways. I climbed down, boots hitting the dirt with a weight that made a few heads turn, but not Diane's. She was too busy acting like she owned the place. I walked straight up to her, hands clenched, jaw tight. She finally turned around, offering me one of those fake smiles that people like her practice in the mirror. "Oh, Jake," she said, like I just stumbled onto a surprise birthday party. "You're back early. We're just enjoying this beautiful weather out here on your lovely property." I stared at her, wondering what kind of person has the guts to stand on someone else's land with a glass of wine in hand and act like they're doing you a favor. "What in the hell," I said, slow and steady, "do you think you're doing on my land, Diane?" She waved a perfectly manicured hand through the air. "Now don't be so dramatic. It's just a little get-together. The community needed a spot to enjoy the day, and your farm is so much more scenic than the park." I took a step closer, voice dropping. "The same park you shut down because you thought it was an eyesore. Wanted a decorative pond instead, didn't you?" She blinked, not bothered in the slightest. "Details," she said with a shrug. "What matters is we needed a space, and all this land of yours is just sitting here, going to waste." "Going to waste," I repeated, grinding my teeth. "You mean my private property, the place you don't get to walk onto without asking?" She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "Jake, really? You've got acres and acres. You don't even use half of it. Why not be generous? Share a little. It's good for the community." I looked around. There were kids tearing through my garden, stepping on the rows I'd planted by hand. Somebody's grandma was setting up a badminton net between two fence posts. A group of dads was tossing a football way too close to my chicken coop. And one guy in cargo shorts had the nerve to climb up on my tractor like he was thinking about driving it off the lot. I took a breath, slow, measured, my pulse still thudding in my ears. "I'm going to give you 5 minutes to clear out," I said. Diane laughed. She actually laughed. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. We'll be done in a couple of hours. Why don't you go inside and relax? You won't even notice we're here." I smiled, slow, the kind of smile that usually makes folks uneasy. "All right," I said, turning away. "Have it your way." I made for the barn. My bulls had been penned up all day, big, restless creatures that didn't like being confined for long. I was planning on letting them out into the south pasture that evening, but plans change. Sometimes they change fast. I unlatched the gate. The bulls snorted, sensing what was coming. These weren't sleepy dairy cows. They were bulls, heavy, muscled, and not particularly friendly, especially not when they spotted a bunch of strangers cluttering up their space. I pushed the gate open. For a moment, there was quiet. Then came the sound of hooves pounding the ground, shaking it under my feet. They burst out of the barn like a storm breaking loose. Screams. Chairs flipped. Glasses shattered. A table went over, scattering plates of fancy hors d'oeuvres everywhere. Some guy dove into a kiddie pool to get away. Diane shrieked, kicking off her high heels to run barefoot across the grass, only to trip on a blanket and go down hard. The bulls didn't hurt anyone. I wasn't out for blood. They just made sure nobody felt welcome anymore. Snorting, tossing their heads, charging through the chaos until every last person was scrambling for the fence. I leaned against the gate, Duke sitting by my side, watching it all unfold like we were at the movies. One guy was trying to climb a fence while still holding a pair of grilling tongs. Another lady dove into a hedge and stayed there. Diane, face red, hair wild, was covered in mud, her fancy sundress torn, and she was glaring at me like she wanted to breathe fire. "This isn't over, Jake," she yelled, shaking a fist. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I tipped my hat back, still leaning against the fence. "Reckon you'll think twice next time you plan a surprise party on my land." And with that, I whistled for Duke and headed back to the house, leaving Diane and her circus to figure out how to get out without running into the bulls again. By the time the last of them limped off my property, they looked like they'd been through a war. Mud-streaked, shoes missing. One guy had barbecue sauce down his leg from when the grill tipped over. My bulls were grazing again, tails flicking like it was any other afternoon. I stood by my truck, arms crossed, watching Diane try to put herself back together. She had a piece of lettuce stuck in her hair. Her phone was in her hand, thumbs flying over the screen. "You'll regret this," she muttered without looking up. "I swear," I shrugged. "Only regret I have is not grabbing a cold beer to watch the show." She shot me a look sharp enough to cut steel, then stomped toward her car, muttering curses under her breath. Her HOA posse followed close behind, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I figured that was the end of it. Turns out I was wrong. 2 days later, I woke up to Duke barking his head off. When I stepped onto the porch, there was a police cruiser sitting in my driveway. Sheriff Randall was leaning against it, arms crossed, hat pulled low over his eyes. "Morning, Jake," he said when he saw me. "Sheriff," I replied, stepping down onto the gravel. "Something I can help you with?" He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Got a complaint filed. Reckless endangerment, property damage, public disturbance." I blinked. "Public disturbance?" "I live on a farm." He gave me a long look. "You let your bulls out on a group of people." "Who were trespassing?" I pointed out. He nodded. "I know, and between you and me, if it were my place, I might have done worse. But Diane's making noise. She's got her lawyer buddy stirring things up, making it sound like you stampeded a herd through downtown." I stared past him, out toward the open fields. Should have known Diane wasn't going to take that loss quietly. "So what? She wants me arrested?" "Not yet, but she's trying to take you to court." I cracked my knuckles. "She wants a fight. Fine. She's got one." 2 days later, I found myself standing in the middle of the Old Town Community Center. The place smelled like stale coffee and wood polish, with folding chairs scraped together in a sloppy half circle. It hadn't seen this many people since Mrs. Abernathy accused Mr. Turner of cheating at the bake-off back in 2009. That scandal nearly tore the town in half. And by the look of the crowd that day, folks were expecting another show. Half the room was farmers, people I'd known since I was a kid. The other half, HOA folks, tight-lipped, arms folded, sitting stiff like they were watching some kind of criminal trial. And Diane? She was sitting right up front, legs crossed, smug as a cat in a birdhouse. If she could have pulled off an actual halo, she would have worn one. Sitting next to her was Todd, her lawyer friend, slicked back hair, shiny shoes, and a look on his face like he'd already decided how this was going to end. The mayor, old Walter Hensley, who'd been running this town since the dawn of time, cleared his throat and leaned into the mic that squealed just enough to make half the room wince. "All right," he said, "we got a situation to sort out between Jake Simmons and Diane Whitmore's HOA." Diane shot up out of her seat before he could finish, holding up a thick stack of papers like she was about to deliver the 10 Commandments. "A situation?" she barked. "This is criminal negligence, reckless endangerment. These people," she waved wildly at her supporters, "were attacked by wild animals. On his land." I stood, slow and steady. "On my land," I said, loud enough to carry. "That's the only part of that sentence that matters." There was a rumble from the farmers, low voices, muttering their agreement. The HOA folks didn't budge. Diane slapped the papers down on the folding table in front of the mayor. I have statements, video footage, legal complaints. Mr. Simmons released dangerous livestock on innocent residents. My guests were in danger. They could have been seriously injured. I folded my arms. They shouldn't have been there to begin with. Todd stood up then, smoothing his jacket down. Mr. Simmons, he said, his voice slick as a puddle of oil, do you deny releasing your bulls with the intent of intimidating and threatening the homeowners association? I stared him dead in the eye. Do you deny your client organized an entire unauthorized event on land that didn't belong to her? Todd's lips twitched, but he recovered. My client was under the impression that the land was community property. I barked a laugh that made a few folks in the back snicker. Community property? You mean my farm? The one with the house, the barns, the fences? The one I pay taxes on? That land? Diane had the gall to huff. It was an honest mistake. I shook my head. Funny. You hauled in tents, grills, coolers, and enough lawn chairs for half the state. That kind of mistake takes planning. The mayor pinched the bridge of his nose, sighing loud enough to carry. All right, he said. Here's how I see it. Diane, you and your group trespassed on Jake's land. No permission, no excuse. Jake, you let out the bulls. Probably not the smartest move, but considering the circumstances, I can't say I blame you. There were a few chuckles in the room. Even Walter cracked a grin. He turned to Diane. Drop the charges. You don't have a case. Diane's mouth tightened into a hard line. Fine, she snapped. But this isn't over. I tipped my hat. Didn't think it was. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. Her crew shuffled after her like kids who'd just been told recess was canceled. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. 3 days later, I found a thick envelope shoved in my mailbox. Legal papers. Diane had filed a property dispute, claiming part of my land wasn't actually mine. Said some ancient zoning mistake meant it was community space. I flipped through the pages, grinding my teeth. She was digging deep now, desperate. I grabbed my keys and headed straight for the county records office. Mrs. Barlow was working the desk like always. She looked up over her glasses as I walked in, holding out the papers before I even said a word. She flipped through them, muttering under her breath, then pulled out the old file on my family's land. Your granddad bought this place fair and square, she said, and we've got the deeds to prove it. Anything Diane's got to stand on? I asked. Mrs. Barlow snorted. Only if she can invent time travel and undo 70 years of paperwork. I thanked her and left with a copy of the file tucked under my arm. Thought that might be the end of it. Again, I was wrong. A week later, I got served. Diane wasn't just going after the land now. She was suing me for damages. Claimed I'd caused emotional distress. Said the bulls had endangered public safety. The number on the lawsuit was enough to make me laugh, but I wasn't about to ignore it. I called Ed. Ed was an old-school cowboy turned lawyer, wore boots to court, and thought neckties were a waste of rope. When I showed him the papers, he thumbed through them like they were a bad catalog. She's hoping you'll fold, he said. Cut her a check so she can move on with her smug little life. She doesn't know me very well, I told him. Ed grinned. She's about to find out. The court date came fast. The whole town showed up, some standing outside, waiting to see who'd come out on top. Diane walked in like she was leading a parade, dressed sharp enough to cut glass. Todd was with her, carrying a briefcase like it held something other than hot air. Ed leaned toward me as we took our seats. You ready for this? I nodded. Let's get it done. The judge was an old guy who'd seen it all. He sighed when he read through the case file, probably wondering how he'd ended up refereeing a farm dispute in his golden years. Miss Whitmore, he said, adjusting his glasses, you're claiming Mr. Simmons released dangerous livestock in an act of aggression? Diane stood, smoothing her blazer. Yes, Your Honor. His actions put innocent residents at risk. The judge nodded. And Mr. Simmons? I stood. I let my bulls out into my own pasture, my land. People who shouldn't have been there got scared and ran. Todd jumped up. Your Honor, this was reckless endangerment. Ed held up a hand. May I submit evidence? The judge waved him on. Ed slid a fat envelope across the table. Inside were photos, Diane's picnic setup, grills, banners, even a sign that said HOA Spring Gathering. There was Diane, smiling next to a wine bottle, like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine. The judge frowned. Miss Whitmore, this doesn't look accidental. This looks organized. Diane stiffened. It was a misunderstanding. We also have witness statements, Ed added, from neighbors who confirmed this event was planned days in advance. The judge rubbed his temples. Miss Whitmore, you trespassed. That's clear. As for the bulls, this is a farm. Livestock roam on farms. Todd was floundering now, but the judge wasn't having it. Case dismissed, he said, smacking the gavel down. And Miss Whitmore? Don't waste the court's time again. Diane turned beet red. She grabbed her purse and left in a huff, heels clicking like gunshots. Outside the courthouse, people clapped me on the back. Ed chuckled. She'll be back. She always is, I said, and she was. Diane didn't try to take my land again, but she didn't let go of her grudge. She sent letters, filed pointless HOA complaints, griped to the town board about the smell of my cows. I built a new chicken coop, put it as close to the HOA property line as I could without breaking a law. Figured if she wanted to live near a farm, she ought to get the full experience. And I made sure the bulls had free rein whenever they wanted it. Diane never planned another picnic.